Hey, what's going on, CPC, and welcome back to yet another Hero Journal. You got to preach, by the way, on Sunday.
Did.
How was that?
It was great. I enjoyed it. It was it is a fresh perspective and my gratitude toward you and what you do every single week, of course. But so neither here nor there. It was fun, and I'm glad that I don't have to preach next week just because it's a lot. But I love doing it. Don't get me wrong. It's just I like singing too.
I'm glad I don't have to sing. The thing about singing is I think I imagine singing is like preaching in the sense that you're very vulnerable on stage.
Yeah.
But at least with singing, everything is planned from the words to the melody. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. Go do it.
Right.
Whereas it's not that way with preaching.
No, it's
but
working on our skill set. That's all.
Right. No, it was good.
The Lord has blessed us in certain ways.
Yeah.
No, it was good though. I really enjoyed just talking to the people and just gotten to talk to people afterwards about how it related to their let's say struggles or just how it touched them in certain ways, and that was refreshing. So
yes.
But yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go first. I asked you before we started. I said I asked her. I said, "Honey, can I go first?" And she says, "Yes." I didn't tell her why. My computer is probably gonna die.
Oh, so that's a good reason.
So I'm like, let me just go first.
Okay.
Is yours gonna?
Nope, I'm good.
Really?
Yeah.
Is
not to promote a certain brand here.
But it's gonna go for another 3 days.
Okay. Yes.
All right. So I'm in Galatians chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. I didn't have to get very far in to go, oh, I've got it.
Yeah.
So, because we started with Galatians 2, right, 2 to 6, wasn't it?
2 to 6, yeah.
So Galatians 2, 1 to 3, it says, "Then 14 years later, I went back to Jerusalem again, this time with Barnabas, and Titus came along too. And I went there because God revealed to me that I should go. And while I was there, I met privately with those considered to be leaders of the church and shared with them the message I had been preaching to the Gentiles. And I wanted to make sure that we were in agreement, for fear that all my efforts had been wasted and I was running the race for nothing. And they supported me and did not even demand that my companion Titus be circumcised, even though he was a Gentile." Now he'll kind of go on and talk a little bit more about this run-in, but right away I read this and I thought, this has already jumped out to me. I'm already feeling this, and so we've got Paul. First of all, I like that it says 14 years later.
Yeah. 14
years into this thing, he goes back to make sure that they're all on the same page.
Yeah.
You'd probably think, I need to figure it all out within the first few weeks. And then 14 years later, he goes, okay, let me just make sure that we're on the same page. Right. As we know, and we talked about, I think last time, that his authority was constantly under attack by the Judaizers, who would say that Paul doesn't know Jesus personally. His message is incomplete. He's missing something. And so Paul goes to Jerusalem and the leaders there to make sure that they're not adding any requirements to the message. When I first read this, I was wondering, is Paul unsure? Is he wanting to double check? I don't know. Was this a moment where Paul is just hesitant or wondering if he's missing something? That was what I got when I first read it, and that didn't really bother me. I mean, Paul could just either have a moment of weakness, or we don't know exactly what he heard from God. I mean, how specific was he? Is Paul just writing what is sufficient for us and leaving out some specific details, and Paul is just trying to double check? But I think one of the biggest things about what Paul is doing and why he's going back is he has this, because he's being accused of preaching this half gospel. I think he wants to go back and see how they're preaching it back home, to make sure that those that knew Jesus are preaching the same message. So he can then go from that moment and say, see, even the guys that knew Jesus, they're preaching the same thing. Because at first it says, I wanted to go back to make sure we were in agreement, for fear that all my efforts had been wasted and I was running the race for nothing. It seems to suggest that he's like, ooh, maybe I've got this wrong. But I don't think that's how we have to read it. I think that Paul could have been confident that he was right. He just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. And then he could come back and say, see, they're preaching the same message, so I don't want to hear any more about this whole Paul didn't know Jesus. He's just, he's missing something. If he can go back. And that's what he continues on in that same chapter to kind of break down that, no, they were on his side.
Right.
And so So that's the explain. I went to the explain because he didn't want the Gentiles to be seen as this second class Christian. That there was this break, this schism between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians, and so this is kind of the explaining what's going on. I've got really, I think, 3 applications that jumped out to me, and therefore I think 3 responses. I think, number one, we always want to make sure we're in alignment with the simple gospel and the true gospel, right? Even Paul is like, let me go back and just make sure we're all on the same page. I think that a lot of us, we should want to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. Mm-hmm. Being raised in the world that I was raised, I had my beliefs, I had what I was taught, and I remember reading a discussion and debate between I think it was a Oneness Pentecostal believer and a Catholic. I don't remember what the topic was, but I mean, you talk about kind of 2 sides of the of the spectrum here. And the Pentecostal ended the conversation saying that if I'm wrong, I want you to convince me that I'm wrong. He says, I would rather know the truth than be right. Mm. And I remember reading that thinking, ooh, I was young and I hadn't quite, I think, appreciated that I want to be right. I mean, but I learned that it wasn't a pride thing. It was, I don't want to believe a falsehood. I don't think any of us should want to believe something that's not true. And so we should all want to be right, not because we're prideful, but because we want to make sure, as kind of like Paul's saying, we don't want to run the race for no reason.
Right.
And so I think this is a reminder that we should always dive into Scripture and figure out what else can I learn, double checking ourselves, making sure. This is something that we try to do our best here at CPC. Pastor Chris talks about, and all the pastors on staff, we do our best to not preach our opinions and the things that we just want to rant on that day. But we're always going to look at Scripture from a certain lens and through different personalities, and so we have to go back and check ourselves to make sure that we're not reading Scripture and making it say what we want it to say, and yet being bold enough to say, okay, what is Scripture trying to say to me? And so, but we should always want that hunger. One of the things that Jesus says we should worship Him with is all of our mind, and there are different doctrines throughout the years that as my loving wife, I have dove headfirst into to try to unpack what has been said about a particular doctrine. I've read scriptures on it. I read different preachers, even the church fathers, which, by the way, I think that we have a tendency to over appreciate and underappreciate the church fathers. I think that
I have to describe what the church fathers did and who
they
are.
The earliest, the ones that really helped get the church off the ground after the disciples, we're talking 200-300 years after Christianity has begun, and those that you've got.
So they had the content written already prior to that. They took the written word.
This is what I was going to say is that I think sometimes certain Christians will overestimate their. I'm really digressing. I shouldn't have gone this, but I'm going to quickly wrap it up. Yes. No. It's my fault. We as Protestants, we don't see their writings and the traditions as co-authoritative with Scripture. We believe in sola scriptura. The Scripture alone has the inerrant authority to teach us. And so I don't think we should overvalue the church. We don't have to go back and read them and say, well, this is what they said, so this is what we got to do. But I don't think we have to undervalue them. We can go back and see what did the earliest Christians think about this teaching or that teaching. I do think we need to remember they're still separated from the events of Jesus 200, 300, 400 years. And so we're closer now to the Civil War time than they were to Jesus, and they're separated by culture. They're not. They were Greek. And so. But it's fun to hear their perspectives. My point is that I have tried to dive into certain doctrines to try to figure out, and because I want to know who I'm serving. I want to know as much about Him as I possibly can. And this passage kind of jumped out to me in that same way. Is we want to know as much as we possibly can know and worship Him with all of our mind. But that leads me to the second application, which is I don't think we should live in crippling anxiety about these kinds of things. I love that Dr. William Craig says that we don't have to pass a theology test to get to heaven. Going back to the simple gospel, let's not add perfect theology, right, as a requirement. It can be a worship portion for us. We don't have the same weight that Paul did, which is to give us the New Testament, right? And so we both want to be in alignment with what what Scripture is teaching us. But we shouldn't necessarily feel like we have to know every single thing. I love 1 Corinthians 5:13, where it says that if we're wrong and if we're out of our minds, like some people say, it is for God.
Right.
But if we're right, it is for you. Yeah. And when I read this passage, what I get out of it is that I'm going to do everything that I can, and if I mess up some details, I'm at least doing it on his behalf. I'm giving that to Jesus. And I think that we can have that same kind of mentality. If we're wrong in this way or that way in the little bitty things, okay, well, we're doing our best, right? But as long as we can get the core message down, that's what's vital. That's my second application is not to let it consume us, this desire to be right. I mean, 14 years later, he travels hundreds of miles to just make sure, okay, we're on the same page, right? And the third application is, just like Paul had this feeling of like, I need to make sure that I have the authority to back me up so people will listen to me. I think a lot of times we feel like we need that same level of authority so people will listen to us. And I think we need to resist that and fight that temptation. You know, Jesus talked about how a prophet isn't welcome in his hometown. And so sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we don't feel like we have that weight to convince somebody of the truth of a teaching. But let's just lean on Jesus, lean on Scripture, share with them what we know, be confident in what we know, and let Jesus take care of the rest. And so these are some application pieces. So for me, my respond is to remember that leaders are learners. I think that there's this weight on us to know every answer about every question. That's just not, it's not how it works. Right. Of course, we want to know as much as we can, but we're always learning. We're always hearing even truths that we know from different perspectives that give us a new appreciation for the truth that we all believe in. And so we're always learning. We're always trying to figure out where are we weak, and so this is one of the ways in which I want to respond. And by the way, the respond part we talk about is so important. I really think that needs to be like our weekly theme, our weekly prayer, our weekly focus is what is our Hear Journal moving us to do, and then instead of just writing it down saying, this is what my weekly prayer is going to be, this is what I'm going to be thinking about for the week. And so for me, it's leaders or learners, constantly be learning, constantly trying to be in alignment with what Jesus and his scriptures are teaching us. But it's also to have a confidence in what I do know, going back to 2 Corinthians 5:13, that sharing with those what I do know, my own testimony, not being so caught up in, well, what if they're not persuaded by my testimony? Well, then they're not persuaded by my testimony. But this is something that he's done for me, and not feeling like we have to have this authority or we have to be in a certain position to make a difference, I think is so important. And so to remembering those things for me, I think is going to be that's how I'm going to respond. And I think I'll say as a campus pastor, it's also good to remember that, I mean, we compare ourselves to other churches, to other locations, we all do this. We all fall under this comparison concern. And so that's something that I want to make sure I never fall into, and that I'm constantly trying to shed and just share with people what I feel like the scripture is saying to me and what Jesus has done for me, and let him do the rest. So I hope that was coherent. Or I'm just sick and I don't know what's going on. I mean, so, but that's what I got.
Did you tell me you have a cold?
It's,
I feel like allergies. Cold.
Yeah, I was like, should we record on another day? I'm so, yeah, but that's okay.
That would be confusing if you said you were sick but didn't tell me you were sick. Anyways, it was good. I liked it. Well, I'm also out of Galatians 2. That's not allowed. The last half.
I'm going to close this just to...
Hey, in all fairness, I did ask you beforehand, because I know how much you love the scripture that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And so I almost asked, like, hey, are you doing this? Yeah. And you were like, go ahead.
First come, first serve, knock yourself out.
Yeah. So mine's, I guess, pretty much in line with what you're saying, but there's just, it kind of, I maybe expands upon it in different themes, I suppose. But, yeah. And for those, by the way, halfway point here, that for those who are tuning in for the first time and you're confused about what he means by the HEAR method, we don't ever want to assume that you know exactly what we're talking about. So you can go to yourcpc.church/rooted, and you can see all of the different, there's resources on there. There's information about the HEAR method, which I'll explain here. But there's more things, so go there. But the HEAR method is where we highlight a passage of scripture. It can be a couple up, one scripture, it could be a little segment of something that stands out to you, whether or not maybe it's because you like it, you have questions about it, you're convicted by it. And then the E is for explain, where you explain it. Confused by it. Yeah, things you want to clarify. All the above. But yeah, the explain is just where in context. So whether who's the author, who's the speaker, who's the audience. Who are they talking to? What's it trying to say basically within
what
the
are
context?
they when they hear the language being used? What do they understand about that language?
Right.
I mean, that's something that's so easy to,
That's very true.
when you think of when we say what's up,
Right.
If you translated that for them back in the day, they would do that. They would lose the meaning, and so trying to understand exactly what's being said, that's sometimes in which I read a passage and I go back and I try to understand what they meant by it, and you go,
right.
Oh, that's
that one with like the Roman soldiers and how they were coming back from war that I did a few weeks ago. I would have never known that unless I knew the context of the scripture around it. So that's just one example.
Right. Which they would have just known.
Right. They would have just known.
It's like when we say Google it.
Yeah.
How long will we say that?
What is a Google?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's your explain, and then you've got your apply, your application where you apply it to today, to your time today. What is the life principle that you can take away from it? Yeah. What is it? How do you word that? The lifetime.
I was
you say it a certain way.
The timeless principle.
Timeless.
I was still thinking about Googling. I was like, imagine if it happened today, and it reads, they asked Paul a question, and Paul replied, Google it. It's like I could just, and you read it 2,000 years from now, you're like, I don't know what that means, but
we'd have to know more. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, so that's and then you mentioned on the respond. It's just how can we then respond to this? We don't want to dive into scripture without having a response.
Let it be your weekly prayer. Let it be the thing that you commit to improvement that week and looking for opportunities to actually live that out. And sometimes you just live them out in different ways. Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So no, that's good. So I am in Galatians 2. I'm the other side of 2, chapter 2. So 2:21. And it is, I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died for nothing. This one, it's a good one. Essentially what's happening here. So you pick up in a little after where you were. So verse 11 is where this segment kind of starts through verse 21. And where this is Paul, he is describing a very tense and public confrontation with Peter. And now, mind you, I don't know if all versions say Peter or Cephas, but Cephas is Peter. It's the same Peter, Simon Peter, who denied Jesus. That's the Peter that we're talking about, or the Cephas we're talking about in this passage. And essentially what happened was this passage is showing how the early church was kind of dealing with this idea of grace and law and identity and where do we place our salvation. And then there's some hypocrisy that's addressed. And so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't want to, because we started with mine, you can kind of see where the E is so important, is that you can understand, like, Paul is coming to them with the concern of these Judaizers who were going behind him and trying. And so you see how he ends with too. He's like, I conclude therefore that what you're sharing. Yeah.
Exactly.
So go ahead. Yeah. So it kind of helps it kind of brings it to life. It's I think it's easy and tempting to read these accounts and forget these were real people. Yeah. Nowadays we don't write stories of people's lives. We have videos and photos and yet, you know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead.
That's very true. Yeah. So Paul is saying that Peter had been freely eating with the Gentile believers. Now, eating was a big deal because it symbolized acceptance and fellowship. It was a big deal for the Jewish custom to eat with other people. If you ate with them in the Jewish culture alone, it means that you genuinely accepted them into the faith. Like it was a big thing. So, but whenever certain people, which would be, I think it was just friends, people connected to James, who was a Jew. When they arrived into the town, Peter pulled away from the Gentiles at this point because he feared the criticism from the circumcision group. And so he almost switched gears. This is the same Peter that denied Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's a trend with Peter I think that's his big rock that he had to kind of get over.
Is that a pun?
Yes, because on this rock. I know you just talked about on this rock and build my church.
Yeah, that's what Peter,
I love the context and explain behind that, by the way. But yeah, so Peter, you can see that this is just his lifelong. I don't know if this is the thorn in the flesh that Paul talks about, but for Peter. But Peter is a people pleaser, I think, is what we're getting at a little bit. So, but Peter is, Paul is calling out in public Peter's actions. And he is basically saying, like, hey, you're being hypocritical. Gentiles are accepted until the pressure of religion comes in, and then we have to switch things. So Paul's essentially rebuking him because the gospel was being distorted in this moment. And so, which I'm thankful for Paul, I guess, coming in and explaining this. So,
I This is our out-here journal.
I know how much you love this part of the scripture.
I didn't mean to.
Go ahead.
But I think what's really a cool takeaway here is where you see Paul's response. This is where I think, a lot of us really, we talk a lot about the love in truth.
Yeah.
And I've said before that it's not enough to say truth. You need to convey truth. You need to communicate in a way where people are going to receive you. And I think that this is a good example of it doesn't mean that you can't have this strong, firm love just because we're trying to offer people grace. Yeah. And you see this within Paul. And so
that's true.
I've heard, Paul is, how do I say this? He's taking a stance, but not in the way that I think a lot of people would expect. They probably, the Jewish Christians, some of them were probably thinking, Paul, stop compromising, our faith. Stop preaching in a way that you think people, stop people pleasing. Mm-hmm. And Paul's response is almost like, I am doing that, but to you.
Right.
I'm being bold in the way that I'm preaching, and I'm not afraid of you.
Right.
And so that I think is really an interesting tell is he is being bold, he is being courageous. He's not compromising because he's preaching grace. In fact, he is not preaching the way that they want him to preach. So he is doing their concerns. He's just doing it to them rather than to the Gentiles. And so I think that's something that today we have to deal with as well. Is sometimes we're like, well, let's if we go easy on people, where I like that kind of that take. He is being strong, he is being bold, and he does that with Peter, and it's ironically on the behalf of grace. It's this weird, but anyway.
Well, yeah, definitely. Which, that kind of
I probably lost you at the end. But
no, that's good stuff though. It addresses the fact that he is addressing the hypocrisy basically. So. But he's doing it with love, and the integrity of the gospel is being protected because of the way he's approaching it. But he's doing it with love in that way. So, so the core issue was not the fact that they were eating together. The core issue was the fact that Paul was almost trying to address this: are Gentiles accepted by grace alone, or do they need to adopt Jewish law? But Peter, I need you to decide, essentially, and then he kind of goes to defend that because Peter knew that salvation came by grace. And it was through Christ, but his behavior was kind of acting on the opposite side. So he defends, and this is kind of getting into what you were saying a little bit, verses 15 through 16. So moving down just a little bit if you're following along, that he's essentially saying a person, this is a sum up of verse 15 and 16, that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. Works of the law would be referencing things like circumcision, maybe dietary laws, so food is a big thing, unclean versus clean, ceremonial Jewish practices as well. Mm-hmm. But Paul is not saying that good works are worthless. He's saying that works cannot save or make someone right with God. And he's specifying works versus salvation. So, but moving on then, this is partly to where it comes from grace thing, because Paul points out something that he was basically assuming that they were already questioning. Verses 17 through 18, he is bringing up I guess anticipating is a good word. He is anticipating a possible objection of being saved by grace. There's essentially the verses 17, but if we ourselves are also found to be sinners while seeking to be justified by Christ, is Christ then a promoter of sin? And this is kind of getting back to, and of course, it's saying if we stop relying on the law, won't that encourage sin? And I get that. I think we kind of see that sometimes too, even today, where, well, if we don't follow these certain things, then isn't grace just going to promote sin because you could just ask forgiveness whenever you want?
It's Paul's content. Yeah. It's like, when he's not.
It's a Paul thing for sure, but it's
he's
true.
Like,
though.
listen, you're free, but listen,
right?
Listen,
I need you to understand.
Don't. Yeah.
And
exactly.
I'll touch on that too. But Paul responds to this anticipated question that he know. I don't know if it was questioned already, and if you heard it from, Joe behind him. I'm sure no one's named Joe in the Old Testament or the New Testament, but someone behind him might be, yapping in his ear a little bit. But good old Joe. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that his response is absolutely not, that this will not encourage sin. It basically, returning to law-based righteousness after receiving grace would actually contradict the gospel. And that's kind of what he's getting at, is it implies that Jesus wasn't enough if we follow that rule of thumb, and that the cross was incomplete. And that's where it goes into if righteousness could be gained through the law, then Christ would have died for nothing. So if human effort, if religious performance, if rule keeping, could save us, then Christ would have died for nothing and the cross would have been unnecessary. And so he's shifting this concept essentially. Now, there's a little bit more explained in my apply, but it's shifts to like how it applies to us today. So switching into the application, one reason I think this passage hits so hard and is because Peter genuinely loved Jesus. That's kind of why I wanted to write about this, is because Peter wasn't just doing something that I guess he knew probably what he was doing, but he was that people pleaser. So I just wonder how many times we're like that too. I think I resonated with Peter in that moment. You know, when let's say from our perspective, we were stepping on stage and trying to be perfect, but then, what does our life look like behind closed doors versus open? What does the person walking in to church for the first time, do they feel like they have to be perfect? Like, we have this idea of people pleasing in our lives and minds. And we have, even the sincerest of believers can know something up here, but then yet compromise our beliefs under that pressure to perform in that way. You're going to say something.
Sorry, I can wait.
That's okay.
This is just to try to clarify what I was trying to say earlier. This is kind of what I was getting at, is that a lot of times we can, to use your words, people please, especially I think in a church setting that like we are a part of, we can kind of be the person we think we're supposed to be, and we can speak in the way we feel like we're supposed to speak. But ironically, it's defending grace. That's where we can be brave. That's where we can be courageous. And even though it almost feels like the opposite is true, is, well, shouldn't you take a strong stance? Isn't that what it means? We are for grace. And so it's tempting to be, we got the Christians in the room. It's time to say the right things, do the right, or what we think are the right things, right, or say what, yeah, of course we want to be dignified and we want to live the best life, but yeah, what are we adding as a prerequisite to salvation or to be in the fold? Sorry, I'm a shush. That's all I got. I'm done. I'm sorry. Again, this is our Here Journal. Sorry, go ahead.
The communal Here Journal. No, I was essentially just gonna say, like, we add requirements to grace, such as how we dress or how we vote or how we worship in a certain style. I know we've got anywhere from aisle runners to people who just stare at the screen or have their coffee in their hands. We have a broad spectrum of ways people worship. We've got people who prefer Bible translations and say others are wrong. We've got people who avoid certain types of music, even certain Christian music, and all these different things. And while those are great table conversations, don't dismiss the fact that we can have those conversations. It's not the basis of salvation necessarily on those regards.
Going back to what you said about Peter, is he wasn't dismissing their significance or their importance, and I think that we can have conversations in the here and now about how we should behave or how we should act or how we should.
Yeah, they still deserve a seat at the table.
And we can have these in-house conversations of, hey, and challenging each other like Paul and Peter did, and like, hey, that we need to be doing this, we need to be doing that, but not I think falling so far into, well, you're not a real Christian,
right?
If that I feel like might be a step too far, and we can't judge somebody's relationship with Jesus, but I think that there's a way that you can take that too far, rather than just taking them seriously. There are good and bad ways to do this and that, and there are bad ways you can translate scripture. There are, but like you said, and Peter addresses that. It's like, doesn't mean we can't do these things or we can't talk about these things, but should we add them as a prerequisite?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and then changing behavior out of fear of religious approval is another way that we kind of add sometimes. So someone maybe acting more spiritual around church leaders, and I just brought that up a bit ago, and Christians pretending to never doubt things, or pastors refusing to admit that they're struggling with something, or exhausted, or hiding behind mental health battles because they fear of being. I guess maybe they lack faith if you have mental health issues, like those types of things, changing how we talk and dress and act behind this door versus this door. And so there's, I guess in these moments, the fear of people becomes louder than the freedom of the gospel in this way. And so I don't know,
I'm glad you did this one. This is a heavy one.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. I'm sorry.
Well,
the fact is, and of course I just.
But I'm with you.
But that's a lot. And like I said, going back to verse 17, the fact is that Christ is not a promoter of sin. This does not mean you can do what you want. This does not mean that you can't believe certain things and do certain things.
Don't run with it. Don't be like, oh.
But salvation is here. Sanctification works its way up, right? Everything
Sanctification is not meaningless, exactly.
Yeah. And so remembering... Yeah, and I actually had the note of Paul wasn't against holiness, obedience, spiritual disciplines, accountability. The fruit of our salvation is built in these things, but they are not the price of acceptance.
Yeah,
that's a good sum up of it. So,
go
ahead. I'm going to go to my response.
I want to sympathize with our Christian brothers and sisters who are the disciplinarian of our belief system. If they're saved, then shouldn't they be showing evidence because of the fruit of the Spirit within them? Like these are valid questions. I mean, what should a regenerate Christian look like? I think that's a conversation to have. I think it's a different one than this one. I think you set the foundation of salvation, and then the question of what comes from that, working from our salvation, not for it. I think these are good questions. It doesn't undermine the discipline part of being a disciple. And so, and it's tough. It's tough to make them make sense. How do we preach grace, but we preach life change?
Right.
And we see that that life change seems to be a necessary condition of a transformed life. It's a balance, but I think that, again, you start with this, and I think that's why so much of the New Testament is you see grounded in this preaching of what is the simple gospel? How does one get saved? This is what we need to get right, because if we don't, we're gonna Judaize everything, right? And add.
It's kind of it's based off of what Christ did for us too. It reminds me of when Jesus says, "Do you love me? Yes. Then keep my commandments. If you love me, you will do this. I'm not forcing you to do this.
And when Jesus doesn't,
love me, you will.
Or when Peter doesn't, he makes him breakfast. He re-challenges him.
Yes.
In a strong way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But if you love me, so based on...
I don't mean to keep adding to your thing.
Yeah. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
Yeah.
And so that's our response. No, the response is simply remembering this verse and the fact that when I walk on stage at church, to make it personal for me, when I walk on stage at church, and I'm talking to, let's say, church leaders, when I am expected to appear a certain way at a grocery store, because I'm wearing the CPC hat. I know many can relate to that. When you wear a CPC merch, it seems that your kids are just acting the worst that they possibly could, right? When you're in the store with them. But it's twofold. Remembering it for myself, in the position I hold, I don't always have to appear perfect. That's a reminder for me, because there are times when I'm of course a very fallible human. I have kids that I have to parent when kids are running around rolling on the floor. I'm sure everyone at our church has probably seen that if they've stuck around more than 10 minutes after service. That we are. I know.
Just like that.
Don't stick around.
And we're like, get up,
and
please.
I turn into this mom mode versus this worship leader mode, right? So that's a reminder that I don't have to be perfect in those moments, but I do have to be Christ-like in those moments. And then remembering it for others too, and for you watching, that remembering that Christ died for the least of these too. That we don't have to be perfect no matter where we are. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
That's really good. This is the beauty of a Here Journal, because I hope you caught, where she was going with this is that, and this is why I think huddles are so beautiful. One of the reasons is because if you share a Here Journal with those in your huddles, you're going to share something, that they read but they didn't think about because of what they're going through. It hits them very differently. We might experience church in a different way than many of you watching, and so we talk about representing Christ well, and because we have the honor of being on stage, people will recognize us. Right. And from time to time, as we have a big church, people, I'm sure you get recognized all the time too. Oh, you go to that church, and when you wear the uniform, you get recognized, and so you're speaking from your vantage point. Is I need to remember that, yes, I need to represent Christ, but I also need to be authentic in. If it's a really bad day, maybe send me to Walmart, but it's like that's the beauty of a Here Journal is it's how does this apply, and what's my response?
Yeah.
Again, I think to distinguish between the A and the R is so big. Is there's these applications you can pull from it, but then how does this hit me?
It's for me.
And her Here journal might hit her in a different way than it does me, than it does you. Same with mine. And so that's the beauty of this. And then again, for that week, until you write that next one, live that out, pray about it. Let it be your way of life that week. Let it transform you and work on you. Let this mean something. Let this be significant, your time with us and your time in your huddles and your time working on your Here journals. But I feel like we've had church together.
Well, you did 2 Here journals and I did 1. So.
I did, yeah. Just as you shared, yes, boom, boom, boom.
I knew that going into it that you.
I did not. Yeah,
it's a very, very powerful chapter.
You know, we came from the same chapter, and so you see,
very powerful.
Paul really he impresses me with, because you got to think, and I'll say this, and I don't want to just freestyle, but you have this guy who lived this very religious life. I mean, you think you're religious. You think that you stick, by the rules. Think of Paul, who he would, what's the word? He held the coats of those who killed a guy for having a wrong belief system. Yeah. This is this kind of rigorous rule following, and it's this Paul. Yeah. That's what blows my mind. It's this Paul that says, I will not add to the simple gospel. Right. It's not somebody like you or I in 2026 America. It's
the guy who is the most legalistic.
Right. It's this Paul that says no. Yeah. But I wonder if that's why he uses Paul. That it's not Paul's Here journal, but it's because of who Paul is, and it's because of what he experienced that he goes, I can't be shackled. We cannot be shackled by what shackled us. And he lives that lawful life to realize this could not save me. This could not save you. This could not save us. This could not save anybody. Let it go. Right. And don't go back to that place where it's like, I'm going to go back to following these rules. How do we worship God? With our mind, heart, soul, and strength, and we go through the sanctification process. But don't let it condemn you. Let that convict you. Let it encourage you to do better this week. Do better this week, whatever it is that you're going through. Right. But don't fall victim to condemnation. Does God still love me? Does he still accept me?
That's good.
You got to stop me. I'm going to keep going. That's
good.
Sorry, that's all I got.
If you love him, keep his commandments. Okay. All right. I'm gonna dismiss. Is that okay?
No. Yes.
Okay. You're dismissed, class. No, I'm kidding. Hey guys, thank you though for joining us this week. And I forget what you say toward the end, but
I don't remember. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us this week. I encourage you to continue doing this. If you miss one, keep on keeping on. Yeah. We love you. Be deeply rooted, would you? And we love you so much, and we look forward to the next one. And we'll see you then.